me ask you a question. And the question is, what do foster and adoptive families need most? For the past decade, my wife and I have had the privilege of being volunteers, and it is a privilege to be a volunteer because they can't cut your pay and you're really hard to fire. Volunteer leaders of a local church-based adoption and foster ministry. We're under the umbrella of the local church, and our mission is to connect and encourage and equip foster and adoptive families, plain and simple. That's what we do, and we focus on it. And over the years, I've heard families come to us with an amazing array of needs, so many different kinds of needs. They need help of all kinds. They need support. They need encouragement. They need someone just to understand and not judge them. They need hope. Everyone needs hope. But what I'm becoming more and more convinced of after all these years of literally walking, preparing, teaching, having the privilege of being in this journey with thousands of families through the Tapestry, our ministry in the Dallas area, and Empowered to Connect, our ministry with Dr. Purvis that goes across the country. What I'm becoming convinced of more than ever before is that every one of these families, and especially the kids that they're serving, they need healing. They need healing. Not some kind of mystical, magical, mysterious, ill-defined, a tangible healing. And here's the thing that I've learned from people like Dr. Purvis. She has a great saying. She says that our kids, these kids that she calls kids from hard places, doesn't label them, it labels where they've come from, and it doesn't limit where they're going. These kids from hard places, every one of them, every kid who comes to us through foster care, through adoption, every one of them has been harmed in relationship. You see, sometimes we want to filter through and factor out, not this child, not this history, or maybe we're all too aware of that, but we forget it after the child's been in our home a couple of weeks or a couple of months, much less a couple of years. Every one of these kids have been harmed in and through relationship. But that's not the end of the story. Because by God's design, He takes the very thing that went wrong, that's broken, and He uses it as the source of healing. I think it's really interesting. We've quoted James 1:27. We've been a part of this movement, this broader movement, for over a decade, and I've heard that verse over and over and over again, but I think somewhere along the way, maybe you, missed the most powerful word in all of that verse. It's the shortest word. It's the word in. Because somewhere along the way, I am tempted, even today, to read that verse, to read something along these lines. Pure and undefiled religion is to rescue orphans out of their distress. But that's not the invitation. The invitation is to visit them, to care for them in their distress. I often say that sometimes we in this movement of foster care and adoption, we're directionally challenged. I am one of those spouses who is directionally challenged. And to add to that, I can be going the wrong way and I'll double down because my wife's chirping in my ear. No, it's the other way. It's the other way. And no, I'm going to keep going. I think sometimes we've gotten directionally challenged in this ministry. We want to bring kids out of this affliction, out of this distress, but the invitation in Scripture is pretty clear. It's to enter into. The direction of healing is a direction of into. And what I know, having served these families in the context of a local church, is that there's no better place on the face of this earth and no better people than the local church. Than the local church in its many varied expressions, literally around the world. But I'm talking about in our context, the local church is the place and has the people to be the agents of this healing. Now, I have to be very careful to say, obviously, that God is the source. If you know anything about agency, if you come as an agent, you come in someone else's power and someone else's authority, relying on their strength. But you come as the conduit, the one who's been sent by that person. I believe that describes beautifully what we're dealing with when we talk about foster care and adoption. And so the question is, if the church really is uniquely positioned, the church in its local expression, uniquely in position, and it has the people to be the agents of God's healing in the lives of these families, children and parents alike. And the call is to enter in. And what do we need to do to make that more of a reality? I think one of the things, and I want you to hear me before you misunderstand me, is that we've got to stop. We've got to stop recruiting families that we don't have the commitment to prepare and support and equip. Now, don't get me wrong. I think some of the ideas the church has come up with, the church is involved in, and I've seen it in states across this country, to recruit families, to raise awareness, is beautiful, necessary, and we need more of it. But we can't have it doubling and tripling if we're not also tripling and quadrupling the efforts to support and connect and equip and prepare these families. God sets the lonely in families, but what kind of families are we preparing and equipping and supporting? That's the question. That's the question we have to answer. So we have to stop stopping short of fulfilling and being faithful to what God's called us to as His people in His place, the local church. The next thing we have to do is we have to start. We really have to start assembling the tools that families need to be successful. When I talk about success, I don't mean creating that Norman Rockwell picture, right, of a family. I mean success in the faithful context, where, as we heard earlier, these families will know what it means to love these children, no matter what, for as long as it takes, with no guarantees and no basis on outcome. I love this definition of love, that love is being committed to do what is best for another for as long as it takes, no matter what the cost. That's the kind of love we have to begin to prepare these families for. So we have to stop stopping short, and we have to start to begin to provide the tools to families that they need. These are tools that will come in and through other families sharing them. One of the things that we've had the privilege of doing over the last 4.5 years is training over 1,000 families, both in our own local situation there in North Texas, but also through other trainers that we've trained across the country. 1,000 families have been trained in a systematic way using material that's really designed for adoptive and foster families and the challenges they face. And every time we train a family, we're hearing back from them, you know what, it's great to get professional help. It's great to get training from my agency, but there's nothing like having another family who's walking this to walk alongside us, but for them to be equipped and really have something tangible to give us. We have to start acquiring the tools in the local church, in the hands of families who are equipped to serve these families and to serve them well. And finally, we have to keep going. You've heard it said, and I'm going to echo this point, that this is really hard. And I'm going to be honest with you that I thought after 10 years of doing this ministry, it would get easier. And I turned to someone just a couple of days ago and said, this is harder than it's ever been before. Because as we've already talked about, the invitation is an invitation into the mess. And if we can really begin to see what God is up to, not just in the lives of these children, but equally in the lives of the mess of the parents that He's called to this ministry, we can begin to envision this as a holy mess in which He is about doing a healing work, not only through us in the lives of kids, but in us at the same time. That holy mess is the invitation, but we have to be honest that it's hard. And so what we need is more volunteers and more staff and more pastors to really be on board, to keep going when it gets hard, and more organizations turning to the local church and saying, what do you need? How can we help you? And boy, are you hard to work with, but we're committed because we know you have a place in this. See, the reality is that I think that what adoptive and foster parents need most is they need other families. Those families can be found in the church, and they're the agents of healing in the lives of kids and in the lives of these families. It is so important. And so I want to encourage you as you begin to think, where do we go from here? How do we bring more families into this to serve the needs of these kids? Not to rescue them out of, but to enter into this holy mess. We got to stop. We've got to start, and we've got to keep going because there's much work to do. Thank you.